Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, this is going to be a special shir on a topic that I've wanted to give for some time, but it's connected to this week's Parsha, and I figured that now would be a good time to try and do it. We're going to be learning through the sugya of imagination, of dimyon, as it is applied in the realm of one's personal service of God and avodas Hashem, and the refinement of the self, and the working with the self in terms of coming to a place of authenticity. What role does imagination play? What role does inauthenticity play? What role does lishma play? What role does pretending play? Can one trick themselves into avodas Hashem? Or does one need to be operating at a place of fundamental authenticity and full preparation to enter in with complete attention? Or perhaps is it something more playful? Is avodas Hashem something more welcoming, calmer, that enables the person to come by way of folly, to enter in by way of laughter, by way of not taking the self so seriously? And so there's a juncture, there's a crossing in which the seriousness of Avodas Hashem and the radical authenticity of Avodas Hashem and the need for absolute honesty and direct lishmakite in the process of uncovering HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, there's also going to be a path of lo lishma. There's also going to be a path of what happens when a person can't spark that authenticity. What happens when a person doesn't necessarily feel as if the path of avodas Hashem, the emuna, the yira, the ahava, the bitachon that they have. Let's say a person doesn't feel that they have the foundation that needs to stand upon. Is there room for them to enter into avodas Hashem as well? And there are many, many ways that we've discussed and that we will continue to discuss the sugya of dimyon. But the particular lens that I want to learn through today is going to be from the writings of Rav Aharon HaLevi of Staroselye, Rav Aharon HaLevi, the Talmud Mufak of the Baal HaTanya, the best friend of the Mittler Rebbe, the Avodas HaLevi, the Baal Sharei HaYichud VeHa'emuna, the Sharei Avoda. Rav Aharon HaLevi was a unique tzaddik who took the teachings of the Baal HaTanya and brought them to the lowest imaginable place, because it was specifically within the lowest imaginable place that the truest unity was going to be revealed. Nobody like the Staroselye, nobody like Rav Aharon HaLevi speaks of the hishta'avos, the absolute equanimity and the equal expression of Hashem's unity that can be found in darkness and in light, in above and in below, in the finite and in the infinite. And how it's specifically by way of the unification of opposites in their opposition that a person comes to reveal the fullest expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, a Torah that is completely saturated by and expressive of the light of Keser. Different than the Torah of the Mittler Rebbe, complementary to the Torah of the Mittler Rebbe in a supplemental way that enables us to go even higher than the Pnimis of Chachma back to Keser. But the Torah of the Staroselye is a Torah of redemption. It's a Torah of how to properly understand the Seder HaHishtalshlus. It's a Torah of how to properly understand the Kabbalah of the Arizal. It's a Torah that takes unity so seriously that it's not afraid of particularization, unlike other paths which take particularization so seriously that they're afraid to ever talk about it because they think that it will shatter unity. The Staroselye was not afraid of pratim. Like the Torah's Chacham, like Rabbi Nachman, he went directly down into the most particularized points that can possibly be particularized, the lowest level imaginable. And if the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu could not be revealed there, then something was missing from the equation. So the Torah of the Staroselye goes all the way to the top, but it also goes all the way to the bottom. It doesn't speak of struggle. It doesn't speak in the language of Yisurei HaNefesh. It doesn't speak in the lashon of what happens when a person finds themselves stuck in those places. It's rather a mode of hispoinenus, a mode of contemplating this worldliness, the physical expression of this world, a metzius that appears to be fundamentally real in all of its dimensions, the quality and the quantity and the shape and the volume and the hardness and the softness and the color and the sense and the high-capacity of this worldliness. That is what Rav Aharon HaLevi was learning from. Because what was absolutely certain for Rav Aharon HaLevi was the radical unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the undying, infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that saturates all things, fills all things, surrounds all things, and in truth negates the actual existence of anything else. That was a given. That was absolutely and abundantly clear. The infinite light of God was present in all things. So then the ultimate question came to be, what do we do with reality? What do we do with Metzias? What do we do with the opposite of God's presence, which appears to be as real, if not more real, than our contemplation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity? And so Rav Aharon HaLevi went into the sugya of the particularized details of this worldly existence in all of its constriction, in all of its opposition to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in all of its pushback and all of its resistance against being included within the realm of unity. Rav Aharon HaLevi went specifically to that place to truly teach what his Rebbe came to this world to reveal, which is Dira B'Tachtonim, literally the Dira B'Tachtonim, the Tachtonim Shebetachtonim, the lowest of the low. In that place of the thickness and the hardness of this worldliness, that's where the true unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be revealed, that it has the capacity of Mafli La'asos, that it can hold together the infinite and the finite, the limitless and the limit. This is the Torah of Rav Aharon HaLevi. And this Torah obviously is going to span the spectrum of religious experience. It's going to speak towards the authentic self and the illumination of the soul, when the soul knows nothing other than the absolute infinitude of God, nothing other than the authentic movement of the soul to run upwards and escape the confines of this worldliness. But it's also going to have to be applied in the human condition, as the Torah of Ishbitz does very well, or perhaps better than anybody. Revealing that place of the thickness of this worldly experience, of the grounded nature. The Torah is going to have to also speak in that place. And so we're going to see from a few places in Rav Aharon HaLevi, Staroselye, that this notion of extending the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the upper realms as well as to the lower realms, and how it's specifically by way of the oppositional unity, that the full unity and the Shivayon Gemura, the absolute equality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence in all things, even in those things that appear to negate his presence, it's going to have an impact on how we live our lives, how we approach our Avodas Hashem. But to start with, the entire escape from Mitzrayim, the entire yichud of Kriyas Yamsuf, of the seventh day of Pesach, is a secret, hidden, modest type of yichud. It's a yichud that takes place from a moment of katnus. Very often when we talk about unity, when we talk about escape, when we talk about redemption, when we talk about all of the positive spiritual ideals, we're generally speaking in a place of godless, of greatness, expanded consciousness, awareness of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that place, a person is able to be miyached. They can connect themselves to the undying source of unity that rests at the core of all things. They can be misdavek to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They can raise up lower elements of existence and bring them back up to Hashem. Those are moments of godless, of expansion, of chesed, of clarity. But then there's moments of katnus, of smallness, of constriction, which at first glance appear to be devoid of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Certainly devoid of the ability to be miyachid yichudim, to draw down the unification of God there, because adrabah, the opposite is true. I find myself in a place of concealment. And it's almost like, as the Arizal utilizing the powerful, powerful imagery, the mysterious, wondrous imagery of the Zohar HaKadosh, of a ram that wants to give birth and it can't give birth. In a state of katnus, a person can't give birth. In a state of katnus, a person feels a burgeoning sense and a desire to move outwards beyond the self, but they at the same point feel constricted within the self. There's a desire to be mispashet, to extend outwards, but at the same point, every attempt to extend outwards is met with a resistance that says, no, it can't be expressed outwards yet. There was no place for the birth to take place. There was no place for yichud to take place. Every yichud is a leida chadasha. It's a new gilui, a new revelation of Hashem's infinite light. And in moments of katnus, it appears that it's closed off, it's locked up, and there's no ability to reveal more godliness. But in the secret of Shvi Shal Pesach, where we go all the way up to the lens of Keser, where we break the system, when we go to the highest point of the system to ensure that we see eye to eye with Hashem, to realize that we have a relationship with you by way of the system, and we also have a relationship with you that exceeds and breaks the system. And as long as we know that both of those hinge points of the relationship are true, then we can continue. And Atika Talia Milsa, Kriyas Yamsuf, was a breaking of the original dependent love that we felt in Mitzrayim. And it was an opening up into that independent love that was not contingent or dependent upon anything, that Ahava She'ena Tali B'davar. And in that place in Kriyas Yamsuf, the katnus itself, the smallness itself, the constriction itself is shown to be the place of birth. And the Nachash comes along, the Nachash, which is katnus, which is the same gematria as Mashiach, because Mashiach comes from that place. It breaks open the womb of that ram with a tiny bite that enables the emergence of that expression, that leida chadasha, that leida of geula, that zivug hasodi bisman hakatnus, that secret unity in the time of concealment, where slowly but surely the light begins to drip out and it begins to reveal itself from the bottom upwards. And slowly but surely, unbeknownst to the entire world, unbeknownst to the entire edifice of concealment, the redemption has already begun to arise. And the Geula is slowly but surely emerging from within that place of Katnus. That's Shvi Shal Pesach. That's Kriyas Yamsuf, where it feels most impossible, where it feels most constricted, where it feels most impossible to grab hold of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's specifically there that suddenly the darkness opens up and the concealment leaves and the bottom drops out, and we suddenly come to realize that Hashem is found here as much as he's found in the upper and highest realms imaginable. And so the yichud of Kriyas Yamsuf is this encounter of being in this man of Katnus, of being in this amount of katnus and smallness, and not knowing how one can find that redemption, not knowing how one can draw out that light of authenticity. And therefore, it's specifically here that I want to try and learn together a few places in Rav Aharon HaLevi's writings that discuss the ability to utilize the secret of imagination, of not needing to be so radically honest with ourselves, but rather allowing ourselves to take on our role as actors in a play that do not necessarily have a fundamental alignment with the things that they're acting out, but rather a deeper bond that I'm an actor and therefore I'm doing them, even though I don't feel them, even though it's just by pretend, even though it's just ki'ilu, even though it's not true. Even though I don't feel that it's true, even if I can't find that place in my mind that validates the experience, nevertheless, there's a value. And we learn that first and foremost, we'll look in the Avodas HaLevi in Parshas Beshalach. And this is on Daf Chav Tes, and I'll read the words in Hebrew, and I'm also going to share pictures afterwards, but I'm going to do my best to keep translations to translations, and then we'll grow together through the particular sources, and we'll see what Rav Aharon HaLevi is doing for us. So in Avodas HaLevi, the Parsha Drashos, so the pasuk says, "Beruach hapecha ne'er mumayim," and with the breath of your nose, the water piled up. Process of Yitzias Mitzrayim by way of Kriyas Yamsuf. And then the next pasuk teaches us of Amar Oyev Edo Fasik Achalek Shalal. Amar Oyev Edo Fasik Achalek. Those 5 aleph which represent the dire straits of being stuck in the Yam and being chased by the enemy. So the Avodas HaLevi is asking a question of what's the language of Ne'er Mumayim. And he says that Ne'er Mumayim, the waters piled up, is from a language of ha'arama, of trickery, of a counterfeit way of acting, of a certain form of deviance away from the specific and sturdy line of wisdom and the allowance to deviate away from it, to enter into the circuitous routes of imagination and inauthenticity and trickery. As Rabbi Nachman introduces us in the first Torah of Likutei Moharan, this is via akveni zu pa'amayim, chachmas melashon via akveni, that there's a trickery inherent within it. There's a ha'arama, that as we receive wisdom of God, there's also an underbelly to it which teaches us the secret of needing to be inauthentic and to enter into that realm of trickery, the noira alila al bnei adam, the place where we don't know what and we don't know how, but we're doing it anyway. And so the Staroselye explains that really, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself in this world, it's always ha'arama. Because in truth, the absolute unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the absolute chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in its indivisible light, cannot be revealed in the containers of separation of this world. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to almost break open the original light and unity of his chachma and trick it into thinking that it can now descend down into particularized vessels, even though it's no longer going to be operating in that full space of unity. The full unity descends down into a place of disunity. And that's the trickery. That's the ha'arama. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu tricks the chachma, and instead of allowing it to only remain in the place of fundamental unity, it now gets compartmentalized and somehow, some way extends downwards into the realms of separation, to the degree that chachma is split and it represents itself above in infinitude, and it also represents itself down below in finite nature. In the language of Rav Aharon HaLevi, he says, Buruach hapecha, with the breath of your nose, al yedei zeh ne'er mumayim. This is where the piling up of the water, the ha'arama, the trickery comes from. Ki ne'ermu hu lashon arama, v'chachma kedemeturgaman achkimu. That arama and ne'ermu comes from the language of this trickery that's rooted in wisdom, because wisdom is translated as trickery, and trickery is translated as wisdom. So what does it mean, ne'er mumayim? What does it mean, ne'er mumayim? It means ki ne'ermu melashon arama. Hainu ki hachachma hu L'chalek hamuhusim lihiyos bebechinos. Mechaven yadua l'chol prat v'prat b'fnei atzmo. What's the arama here? What's the trickery? Is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking his chachma, which is his absolute unity, and he's splitting it up into particular points of unity, all which can then be applied to particularized particulars, each one in accordance to itself. And there's also an arama going on. There's also a trickery going on in the sense that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hiding the essence of his wisdom, hiding the essence of his intention, which is the revelation of unity. Umalbisho b'levush zar, and he's enclothing his unity in a garment that appears to be the polar opposite and alien to that desire. B'davar hanira menaged lekavnaso, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu engarbs himself in something that appears to be the polar opposite of his revelation and his unity. V'al yedei zeh dafka yipol kavnaso, and it's specifically by way of dressing himself up in the polar opposite of what his actual essence is, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite unity can find expression down below in the particulars. Ki yadua she'arama hu tachbulos hachachma lipol kavnaso al yedei tachbula. That it's known that arama, this trickery, this counterfeit nature, this playing around with authenticity, are the many ways that a person can come to wisdom to ensure that their desired outcome is completed. Those are the tachbulos, those are the plots, those are the schematic thoughts which are not necessarily authentic, but rather planned out from the get-go to ensure a prescribed result. And so too, Hashem's revelation down below and splitting up that original infinitude so that it can be revealed in particular lights, that's also arama, that's also trickery, that's also a lie. To the degree that now it appears that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is separate, and it's the opposite of the revelation of his absolute light. But it's specifically by way of this arama, by way of this trickery, by way of descending away from the ideal and going into the reality of maybe not feeling something explicitly, it's specifically there that we will be able to reveal the essential desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as it's revealed later on. And why is it Beruach HaPecha? This is amazing. Beruach HaPecha near Mumayim. Why is the arama coming from Beruach HaPecha? Zok the Heilige Avodas HaLevi, that the Ruach HaPecha is the nose, it's Arich Anpin, the place of Ratzon, the place of taking a deep breath, of Arichas Af, of sweetening anger, that place of the Choitim of Arich Anpin, that place of Keser Ilah. So the Zohar Kadosh tells us, and Rabbi Nachman brings in the second Torah of Likutei Moharan, that they're train nukvan de pardashka de Arich, that there's two nostrils to the nose of Arich Anpin. And those two nostrils, one gives breath to Chayin, to life, and one gives breath to the Chayin, to the life of life, which is the secret of redemption and the secret of Mashiach. Zok the Heilige Avodas HaLevi. These two nostrils represent polar opposites. Chayin, the regularity of life that comes from Keser, is the separation that a person finds themselves in, the inauthenticity that a person finds themselves in, the splintered and fragmented nature of this worldly existence that appears to be devoid of the illuminating infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. The Chayin, the light of Mashiach Tzidkenu, is the Yichud Ilah, the fundamental recognition that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is built Bal Gvul. But one is not enough. For HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be totally shalom, he has to be able, Kaviyachol, to reveal himself by way of both, the Chayin and the Chayin. Yichud Ilah and Yichud Tata, Bilti Gvul within Gvul itself. Yesh and Ayin, Aniva Ayin b'vasachas, truthfulness and falsehood. And so it's specifically from that place of Keser, from the two nostrils, which represent the two polar opposites of Chayin and Chayin, Bilti Gvul and Gvul, light and darkness. It's specifically from there that we draw down the possibility of arama, the possibility of knowing that things have to break away from their authentic, direct nature of infinite expression and descend down into the fragmented territory of individualized and particularized expression, which by definition demands a subjective understanding, which takes it away from the objective truth. And so we see that there's an arama that is necessary in the Avodah. And only from that place, says the Avodas HaLevi, can we then go to the secret of Amar Oyev Verdo Fasika Chalek Shalal. The secret of that even in the Yam, I'm being chased, the enemies are at foot, the darkness is enclosing, all of the tzimtzum is back, but nevertheless, as the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh teaches us, and the Kamarna brings it down all the time, when a person comes to see those five aleph as the five expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's illumination in the secret of the Pele Elyon, to be mamtik, the chamisha gevuros, the 5 different difficulties that a person encounters in existence, the 5 stages of senses that grasp the world as something frightening. When we uncover the hidden aleph that's under threat, and we uncover the secret of the Pella Elyon and the Alufa Shal Olam there, we're mamtik all of the dinim, and Yispardu Kol Pelayavan, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealed in the darkest of places as if it was the lightest of places imaginable. That hasaga of Amar Oye Ferdo Fasika Chalek, that I can reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu specifically in the chase, in the struggle, in the fight, in the battle, in the concealment, in the inauthenticity, etc., that's only a das that is drawn down from the nukva, the pardashka, from the 2 nostrils of Arach Anpin Kavyachol, from the bilti gvul and the gvul, and how both of them are fundamentally unified together. That Pella Elyon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's radical unity, the ability to reveal godless within katness. The only way to go about doing that is by way of arama, is by way of that trickery, that breaking up of infinitude and allowing myself to operate within a place of finitude, to assume that maybe Hashem is not here right now, and to allow myself to feel that feeling of, okay, I don't feel absolutely connected right now, because you conceal yourself, and that gives me more permission to try and find Hashem in ways that might not be 100% authentic. But instead of then pretending to be authentic, I can authentically pretend. I can learn the secret of acting for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu enters into that place of arama, so too Yaakov Avinu has to enter into that place of arama. So too Yosef HaTzadik has to enter into that place of arama. So too Moshe Rabbeinu has to enter into that place of arama. And Aaron HaKohen has to enter into that place. And the Kohanim and the Leviim and all of the Tzadikim, they're Shadchanim, Sheker Doiver V'Kesef Noitel, they're revealing the joke of it all. They're revealing that in truth it's all harama. It's all a long game. It's all a joke that hasn't yet been finally told, and the punchline hasn't been delivered, but nevertheless, the tzaddikim keep score of the punchline, and you can see it in the grin on their face that it's all harama. It's all one show. It's all one long, extended act that we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be served, not for any other reason. Hashem wants us to put on our costumes, and therefore we put on our costumes, and we will do anything to bring joy to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will and should do anything to bring joy to us, enabling ourselves to be actors, just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is acting with the concealment and with the tzimtzum. So too we have to enter into an act. And from here we'll go to another makor. This is the 2nd volume of HaLevi. So we read before from Parshas Beshalach about how Kriyas Yamsuf is ultimately about this ha'arama, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ability to break free from his absolute unity and act as if he's separate, so that there can be a fundamental revelation of the true unity of unity and separateness. So now the Avodas HaLevi is going to teach us a little bit of what this means for the human experience itself. What does it mean to be a human being in a world where I have to now also occupy this liminal space between being 100% authentic and being inauthentic and imagining myself to be a certain way, even though I know I'm not that way. So this is in Parshas Nitzavim by the Haftorah. V'zehu vayomer ach ami hema banim lo yashkiru. That in the end of the day, they're my nation, and they're my children, and they're not liars. They're not lying. They're not false. Perish. Sheyiyeh bebchinas banim, dahainu sheyiyeh behisgalus hamidos dafka. That the avodah that a person has to enter into in this world is by way of midos. A person is meant to feel something in this world. It's not enough to operate in the territory of the unfelt pleasure of contemplation and unity of God. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants is a dir b'tachtonim. And the dir b'tachtonim is within the midos, is within the parts of Zar Anpin, is within the ahava and the yira and the dveikus, and the forgetting of ahava and the remembering of ahava, and the forgetting of fear and the remembering of fear, and the forgetting of dveikus and the remembering of dveikus, and connectivity and application. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants our pa'ula not just in the gimel ration of chachma, bina, and das, or keser chachma and bina. He wants us to be an adam. That's the tachlis, to be an adam with midos tovos in this world. So what does it mean to descend down into that part of ourselves, almost like the ha'aram of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, where he descends from his infinitude into the apparent separation of his light, or the application of his light by way of separation. So too the self undergoes this process. We have to leave the oceanic unity of the mind and enter into the territory of emotional experience, of living in accordance with my midos. But, says the Avodas HaLevi, there's a problem here. What's the problem? What's the problem with entering into the avodah of midos? Midos, emotions, our experience in the containment valves of our levels and our lives, in truth, they're false. They're not true. Because the only thing true is the absolute infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelation. Anything that seems to impart any type of separation or division is ultimately not true. They're kalim, and kalim are not true. The midos that we're supposed to live with are referred to as sheker. Kalim, because the midos are referred to as vessels. And in truth, there's absolutely nothing that can hold or contain the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because there's no grasp of you whatsoever. In the midos. Razal. As Chazal said, emes amar al tivra. When it comes from a place of absolute and fundamental truth, there's no room for creation because creation is a falsehood. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's a real falsehood, but it exists by way of falsehood. It's not real. It's not true. Emma said, don't build, don't create the human being. Because in truth, from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity, it's impossible to even come to the relative possibility of relativizing a way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light can be drawn down to reveal itself within creation itself, which is Tzimtzum and Kalim, Mekelim Shonim. Because even when they mavatal themselves entirely, they're all lies. It's a lie. Everything is a lie in relationship to the emes la'amiso of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light. All of it is considered as kulo ksharim lagabe amisasu yisparach. The truthfulness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as the Rambam describes, the necessary existence, the truth of truth. Everything else is considered as false. I can't grasp the truth of the truth, and Mamela, everything else is going to be a lie. And all of my bitulim and all of my bittul and all of the effort that I'm putting into my avoda, it's all by way of grasp. And if it's by way of grasp, it's by way of measure. And if it's by way of measure, it's by way of limitation. If it's by way of limitation, then it's by way of sheker and lies. It's the aspect of the gvul. That even Yaakov Avinu, even Moshe Rabbeinu, these tzaddikim, they still had an element of v'yavik ish imo, of encountering the yeshus, of realizing that we're still not touching the essential light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's all lies. And so what's the avodah? The avodah is to go into the lie. The avodah is to go into the alma d'shikra. The avodah is to descend down into the necessary compartmentalization of the self in its encounter with the constriction in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu enables himself to descend down into in the secret of ha'arama, and to embrace the fact that, okay, so I'm going to be a liar with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My avodah might be an avodah of sheker. My avodah might still be an avodah of dimyon. My avodah might never, ever leave the realm of imagination, but nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the entire world is imagination. And I'm going to fight imagination with imagination. I'm going to fight it specifically by going down into the tachlis of this world, which is to reveal you by way of the sheker itself, by way of the concealment itself. And so we see in these two places in the Avodas HaLevi, in Parshas Beshalach, by Kriyas Yamsuf, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the secret of being mamtik the dinim and katnus, to reveal a secondary, in case of emergency, way of breaking free from exile, the Avodas HaLevi is revealing the arama of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol. The fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitzamsim himself, he descends down, which is the lie that HaKadosh Baruch Hu performs. HaKadosh Baruch Hu throws emes down to the ground and he allows it to shatter into infinite pieces so that we can retrieve emes from down here, from a subjective reorientation to truth, rather than some objective absolute grasp of truth. And we see that this is the entire realm of Avodas Hashem as well. A person is entering into midos even though it's sheker. And now we can enter into the place where the Avodas HaLevi brings us into real contact with the utilization of imagination. Because the goal of the Balatanya and everything that Rav Aharon HaLevi was doing was rooted in the Balatanya, everything. And a light that the Balatanya didn't even reveal elsewhere, revealed in hidden ways in Nefesh Shvala, how the Torah of this world is a Torah of lies, And it's only by way of the trickery and falsehood and inauthenticity that a person can truly come in contact with themselves, because when they accept that necessary descent down into inauthenticity, then we can also try and be authentic. If we deny our inauthenticity, then we're never ever going to be able to be authentic. We'll be inauthentic about our authenticity rather than being authentic about our inauthenticity. The Torah does not want us, again, it does not want us to be inauthentic about our authenticity. Rahman al-Itzlan, may I say, that is the opposite of avodah, to be inauthentic about our authenticity. What the Torah is asking us to do, and the considerations that are being made within the Torah itself, are that we should be authentic about our inauthenticity, to own our humanness, to recognize that mitoich sheloi lishma ba lishma, that in the very recesses of lo lishma rests the hidden light of lishma, because there's no level of lishma that will be truly lishma. Every level of lishma is going to be considered lo lishma and inauthentic in relationship to the next level of zichach I can go to. And when the human being accepts upon themselves the fact that I am an actor on a play and I can serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu even when I'm not feeling it fully, or even when I'm not certain about anything, or even when I don't know my left from my right, it doesn't take away from the authenticity of the avodah. It reveals a deeper level of authenticity, an authenticity that can be revealed specifically in the place of pretend, when I don't take myself too seriously. And the Baal Tanya spent a lot of time pushing against this avodah, asking us to refine, bittul, be mevatel ourselves, get rid of ego, get rid of the human condition that drives our behaviors, uncover the sources of the conflict of the self that motivate the continued activity of a person in this world, which is very often just a repetition compulsion and a shaping around the cluster of symptoms that compose their subjectivity. And a person has to clarify the klipas noga, and a person has to run towards emes, and a person has to have absolute certainty in their avodah. And that seems to be what the Baal Tanya is giving us. But nevertheless, there are hints and there are kinks in the armor that reveal that in truth, the deepest element of truth is a truth that understands that it builds itself out of a place of inauthenticity, out of a place of not knowing. Rather than operating from a place of absolute knowns and drawing truth from there, what we do is we operate from a place of absolute unknowns, and we cultivate a delicate model of a lived experience of faith, of derech hamuna b'charti, that enables me to function as an actor on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's stage. And there are hints to this that are bokeh, that shine forth from within the Tanya, Parak Yudalid, Tasvav, Tasayin. The Pasuk says, Titein emes liYakov, give truth to Yaakov. What do you mean, give truth to Yaakov? Yaakov is truth. Why does Yaakov need to get truth? The implication of giving truth to truth is that truth doesn't yet have a proper understanding of truth. Elama, Zakta Balatanya, that truth has to include within itself its opposite, the inauthenticity, the sheker, dover v'kesef notel, the fact that sometimes things have to come about by way of recognizing that it's false, by way of recognizing that it's inauthentic. And then in Chinuch Katan, the kuntris that connects Safran Shel Beinanim and Shar Yichud V'Amuna, the light of Keser that connects Chochma and Bina, it says Chanoich Lanar Al Pi Darcho Gam Ki Skin Lo Yasur Mimenu, that you should teach a person in accordance with their own path, so that when they grow, they won't leave it. Zok Tehelig Balatanya Al Pi Darcho Mikan She'eno LaEmes LaAmiso. We see if it's in accordance to the subjective path of each and every person as they need it in the place that they find themselves, then we're negating the notion of an objective perspective of truth over here. Elama, that's the ikar point. The person has to come and make a unity between truth and subjective truth, between seichel and dimyon, between knowing and not knowing, between holding and not holding, between having and not having. Both are fundamental when it comes to grasping the light of Keser. And so Rav Aharon HaLevi becomes a guardian of this element, and it's clear within the writings of Rav Yitzchak Isaac Hamler as well, the access to dimyon, the kedusha there, and what happens when a person contemplates something false, that the shikras hasheker hu amisaso, that the falsehood of the lie is in and of itself its very point of truth, and profound, almost miraculously modern languages of how to orient ourselves towards dimyon and imagination and inauthenticity and lo lishma in our avodah, and the recognition that I'm just a turkey under the table, but I can still act like a prince. The Avodas HaLevi becomes the guardian of this, and he draws this into a place of avodah. In the Sefer Shari Avodah, Rav Aharon HaLevi wrote two svarim that were commentaries on his Rebbe's Sefer. Shari Avodah is a commentary on Safran Shel Beinanim, the process of being a Beinani, of davening, of breaking free from the ego, of bittul, and growing and refining the self, etc., and overcoming the nefesh habahamis, and being koifef the nefesh habahamis, and being mahapech the nefesh habahamis, and it reflects the process of Tanya, and it goes through Torah, Avodah, it goes through Tshuva, it goes through all of the elements of the self in the process of Beinani. And then in the Sefer Shari HaYichud VeEmuna, Rav Aharon HaLevi goes through the Shar HaYichud VeEmuna, and that's where he reveals depths upon depths of the Torah of Keser, Ilah, so much of what the Rebbe Shlita bases his Torah on, the Torah of the Avodas HaLevi and the Yichud of the Shivayon HaGamor, that's Shar HaYichud VeEmuna. And what we're looking at is the Hakdama Tashari Avodah. So this is what the Avodas HaLevi is really giving us, Eitzos Pshutos, in terms of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's here where we're going to see not only the permission to engage with HaKadosh Baruch Hu by way of inauthenticity and pretend and utilizing our imagination, and even though we're not there, to hold ourselves as being there, as long as we're aware that we're not truly there, and that's what enables me to be there. Not only is it permitted, not only is it necessary, but there's a certain idealism that's hidden within it. As we've spoken about so often, the descent down from Chachma into Bina is ultimately to reveal the light of Keser, to descend down from the original form of Emes that couldn't tolerate Sheker into the territory of Sheker, and revealing there that the Sheker also has a Nakud of Emes within it. We can then go back up to uncover a deeper level of Emes, which is Emes La'amisa, which contains both Emes and Sheker in it, because everything is Gant Sheker Be'erech, and in relation to the true and singular truth, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so listen to the words of the Shari Avodah, listen to the words of Rav Aharon HaLevi. Hine hagam shekatavti le'el b'shem admor nishmasei eden sheha'avodah hu levarer hagashas yesh mitzad atzmo. That even though I explained earlier that the entire work and mission of the Alter Rebbe, of the Baal HaTanya, was to clarify and remove all sense of self and somethingness from the individual subjective experience, meaning to refine the self so that it's all authentic. Im kol zeh hayu kol devarav hakadoshim tamid lekarev halavavos ulaames kol ha'espalus shel kol echad ve'echad lefum shira dilei. Nevertheless, says the Avodas HaLevi, in spite of the fact that he demanded absolute authenticity and the removal of a sense of self, nevertheless, his holy words were only always about drawing the hearts closer to Avodas Hashem and finding truth within all of the modes of experience and ecstatic encounter that a person feels, each and every person and according to their own subjective position. Shebal yipol lev ha'adam alav me'acher she'ikr ha'avoida v'ha'espa'alus yihya be'oifen lahasir hargashas atzmo sheba'avoida she'kedei shelo yihya hisarvus toivara. That a person should not have their heart fall within them, a person should not feel sad, that the essence of their work and the spiritual experience that they have is just always trying to get rid of a sense of self, to be mevatel a sense of self, to ensure that I don't get in my own way, and always working on refining, but never actually tasting the thing itself. To the degree that when a person finds themselves continuously struggling and fighting against the self without being victorious over the self, we'll come to assume that our spirituality is also rooted in the self and rooted in self-interest. A person shouldn't fall as a result of this fear. A person shouldn't be afraid of this. A person might think that that a person might think that my love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu is only imagined and that it's not clarified and it's not true. That God forbid a person will come to a place and they'll say, because I can't be authentic, because the self will remain, because I'm descending down into the territory of trickery and inauthenticity, perhaps I shouldn't do anything at all. It was for this reason that the Baal HaTanya found truth, and he drew close all forms of his pa'alus, all forms of the self experiencing itself, and all forms of the loves that the self encounters in its process. And don't worry whether it's imagination or not. For his entire book, the entire book of the Tanya is built around a simple notion. The pasuk that tells us that the matter is exceedingly close to us in our mouths and in our hearts in order to do it. I can imagine it. I can trick myself into doing it. As anybody who reads his book will see, as we just hinted to those hidden prakim, which talks about the Titain Emes Yaakov, that there's a certain falsehood at the heart of the truth. because everything is false in relationship to the essential truth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All the Yuliyim are Sheker. Even the Gilui of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us is a Harama. The only goal of the Baal Tanya was to make room and give permission to each and every person to do what they needed to do in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And not to cause a person to go astray and feel that they can't serve him because they're inauthentic. As my Rebbe explained on the Pasuk, Yoinasi Tamasi, my dove, my perfect one, my perfect dove. Ki Yona, what's the language of a Yona? What's the language of a dove? Hulashain Aina'a. It's a language of fraudulency. It's a language of trickery. It's a language of arama. It's a language of inauthenticity. Asher alkein bal yichush la'avodaso shehim mu'unna be'ezet ha'aroivas. Meaning a person should not be stuck in themselves thinking that I can't enter into avoda because there's a little ta'aroivas of ona'a or arama in it, or that I'm being inauthentic. Ki hagam shehi me'una, even though it's a yona, even though it's false, even though it's inauthentic, even though it's counterfeit. Afal pikein hi tamima, it's still perfect in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avada, it's inauthentic. Everything is inauthentic because the only authentic thing is the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's essence, kavyachol, which is never reachable. Memela, everything, every level of grasp, every language of speech, every language of thought, every experience is sheker because of in orientation to the emes la'amisa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Memela, we have no time and no right to say, oh, there's a little bit of imagination in it, so I shouldn't do it. Adarabba, ipcha mistaber, when you're aware that there's imagination in it, that's where it's still perfect. Hagam shetzarech levarer hargasha, so yes, avadi, you have to work on yourself. Kol ze nitzrach liyadia b'chdei sheyeda kol echad ve'echad b'nafsho kifi erech avodos lifi erech lahasir ta'arevis lifi erech sichlo. V'chol zehu avodah. This is the entire avodah. A person has to be aware of their inauthenticity. A person has to know where they're holding within themselves. A person has to know, as Rabbi Nassan said, there's no harder sugya in the entire world than to know where one stands. A person has to understand the level that they find themselves at, and not, God forbid, to reach beyond their level, and work where they're at to clarify the ta'aroives of emes and sheker, of eina'a and emes. But it's still tamim, yonasi tamasi, yona ben amitai. Yona is a language of falsehood and ana'ah, but at the same point, it's also ben amitai. It's the secret of Yona ben amitai going into the sea, like we discussed in the Shir on the Zohar Kadosh. V'chol zehu ha'avoda. This is the avoda. It's not that this is also part of it, and you have to make room for this. This battle with the dimyon and the acceptance of the dimyon as something that will be there, and instead of trying to kill it, I can refine it and elevate it so that it can become a kli for nevuah and ruach hakodesh. That's the milchama. This is the milchama of tefillah. And in battle, there are times where I can be victorious, and there are times where I can't be victorious. But because I'm afraid I'm going to fall and not be able to be victorious fundamentally over my inauthentic drives and my imagination, that I shouldn't battle at all, at that point I'll lose entirely. And then I'll be stuck. Continues the Shari Avoda. This victory, what we're referring to as authenticity, is also just relative. There's no point of structured authenticity, of truthfulness. It's all going to be in accordance to the imagination of the individual person in terms of how much they've removed their sense of self, in relationship to the person who's operating on a higher level. Will be considered as if I haven't even begun to work on myself. Because each and every person is their own existence and there's infinite levels. And my working through inauthenticity to try and come to some semblance of authenticity might be considered completely and utterly inauthentic in comparison to somebody higher. But that means it's also considered fundamentally authentic in relationship to something lower. And it's not even about measuring myself against that person or that person. Each person contains three parts within themselves: the self of the future, the self of the past, and the self of now. So in relationship to the self of the past, I might be fundamentally authentic, and that may have been all completely inauthentic. And in relationship to the self of the future, I might be inauthentic because the level of authenticity I stand to reveal within myself is magnificent in relationship to where I'm at right now. But in the moment a person sees themselves as authentic and inauthentic at the very same time, it's all relative. Hakol tali be'erchei hakinuyim bilvad, as the Rashash says. Everything is dependent upon the relative positioning of the terms. Ki yesh madregos lein mispar. Shakol bittul hahargasha shel hatachton b'madrega nechshav lahaelyon mimenu lahargasha k'mura. That every level of the negation of self on a lower level will be considered a sense of self on a higher level. Kema'amar hakasav, like the pasuk says, biyad hanaviyim adama. The revelation of prophecy was by way of imagination, and imagination emerges in accordance with the subjective, particularized expression of the heart of each and every individual. Kemuva baraya mehemna, as the Zohar Kadosh says in Parshas Bo, Mem Beis Amud Beis. Ubiyad hanaviyim adama. What does it mean? In the hands of the Nevi'im, I will be imagined. Di'ihu nachis l'chol chad v'chad kifum dimyon delay. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu descends down to each and every person in accordance with their own imaginings, their own imagination, their own inauthentic imagination. But the dimyon is an act of feeling something, which we saw is kulo sheker. I haven't negated my selfhood yet. I haven't gotten rid of somethingness yet. It's just that my negation is in accordance with my own imagining of negation. Nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu descends down, not in spite of, but specifically because of it. Hashem reveals himself in my imagination. Kamo hanaviyim, like the prophets. Only Moshe Rabbeinu was a complete and utter bittul, and that was still limited. That was still unable to give him the panim, because all human beings are limited. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu saw through the clarified lens of all of the other Nevi'im were seeing through a clouded lens, but nevertheless, Moshe was still looking through a lens. It was a clear lens, but it was still a clouded lens, and there was still dimyon there. For all of the other Nevi'im, any revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu enclosed itself within a certain grasp of this worldliness, of existence. It's just that they utilized their imagination to negate in accordance with their own level. And even though it was still operating from a place of cloudiness and imagination, the pasuk still says, Ve'era es Hashem mamish, that they saw Hashem mamish. No one's saying that, no, it was just imagined. You imagine something real. Within the inauthenticity, there's a kernel of authenticity, which enables me to be authentically inauthentic and to realize, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm a badchan for you, like David HaMelech, badchana de malka. He understood the goal. He understood that he was the Baal Tefillah. He was an actor on a stage. And that's why he was able to dance with all of his might, never afraid of emptying himself out, because there's no place of being fully emptied out. There's always more dimyon to work with. As Rabbi Nachman says, the dimyon is the shorish of the emunah. I don't know anything about emunah. I just know how to imagine emunah. Derech emunah b'charti. It's endless. It's certain that in relationship to Moshe Rabbeinu, all of these Nevi'im were operating from a place of selfhood. And nevertheless, Nigla Hashem Baruch Hu Mamish, HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself to them, in accordance with their bittul, which was an element of imagination. And we must learn from this with regards to all of the levels that proceed from and are lower than the prophets. All the more so within each and every soul. In accordance with the imagination of each and every person is their grasp of their nakuda of emes, their true. Not only is this permitted, this is the entire purpose of existence and the creation. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be found specifically in the place where we feel that it can't be found, in our dimyon, in our inauthenticity. Because the purpose of creation is so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could reveal himself specifically by way of somethingness itself, to reveal that somethingness itself is contained within the unity. That Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem, the two nostrils, the self and the infinite, together as one, revealing Ani v'Ayin v'Vasachas, the secret of the Chutma and the Nukva, the Pradashka, the Arach Anpin, which is the secret of Ne'em Rumayim. That the waters lie, that Chachma splits itself up into a lie to appear as separation, because it's specifically within that apparent dishonest separation that we come to uncover the truthfulness of our imagination. And when it comes to somethingness, when it comes to existence, there's endless levels. But from the elevated perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's truthfulness, where everything else in accordance to that level of truthfulness is considered sheker v'kazav, everything is emes. Because imagination is also a revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that expresses itself within the mind of each and every individual, as is explained in the Raya Mehemna extendedly. And we'll be able to explain this later on as well. And this is what Chazal said, Lo alecha hamalacha ligmor. It is not our responsibility to complete the task. And we also are not free to excuse ourselves from the task. Meaning to say, Lo alav ligmor shia b'shleimus rakol echad ve'echad lafi ercho. This is what it means. A person's avodah is perpetually in that place of refining by way of yeshus, by way of imagination, by way of stuckness, growing, coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, growing and coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Avodas HaLevi continues and he gives us a little bit more insight into this. And this is in Shari Avodah, Shar HaTfilah, Parak Mem, Daf Shin Yud Aleph. So we've seen the Avodas HaLevi in Parshas Beshalach, which teaches us about the ha'arama of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the splitting of the sea, which is allowing infinitude to divide itself into divisible particular points, which reveal the potency of the infinite, which is all a lie in relation to the true essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how it's specifically that lie that enables the unity between the Bilti Gvul and the Gvul. And then we saw in Parshas Nitzavim how this is what Avodas Hashem is also when we enter into the Midos, when we enter into the elements of refinement of the self and working to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu from within the opposite of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is specifically where we're meant to find him. It's not just an allowance, but rather it's the low that reveals the highest high, the secret of the dimyon, which is not the absence of God, but rather the revelation of God by way of not having full grasp, and that's Biyad HaNevi'im Adamah. That's the Yichud Hasodi of Shvi Shal Pesach, of a katnus that reveals. So Zok the Heilige Avodas HaLevi, after describing the need for Moshe Rabbeinu to be in a state of perpetual battle with his Yetzer Hara, to negate the Nefesh HaBahamis to such a degree that he was Parish Min HaIsha, after Isha Kushis Lakach, which is the secret of Dimyon, Moshe Rabbeinu ascended and he removed himself. So theoretically, there's the implication that ultimately a person can't allow themselves to feel the self. They can't allow themselves to be inauthentic. Zok the Heilige Avodas HaLevi, Aval Kol Zeh Hu B'Bchinas Tzadikim Gemurim Asher Higiu L'Shleimus. This is only in relationship to the true tzaddikim who are also seen in relative nature, that there's no tzaddik who's perfect, but in relationship to the lower level of perspective, the tzaddik appears to have gained some element of human perfectibility. Not absolute perfection, God forbid, but just relative perfection from a lower level. And over there, sometimes there's a love that a tzaddik can uncover, which is called Ahava Rabbah, where a person feels a fundamental connection in the Esav Ratzon, Be'esis Oiris, Apnimius Me'in Sof Baruch Hu, when a person has an awakening to cleave to the depth of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether in general or in particular in moments of desire, when there's a light of the essence, so to speak, that descends down into a person's soul. Or from the side of the 7 tzaddikim, the Shiva Haroim, which express themselves within the heart and soul of each and every Yid. So each and every person is capable of reaching that level. We can reach a level of authenticity. We can reach a level of being like Moshe. And even though a person hasn't arrived at this level in any element of perfection, that they've gotten rid of themselves to the degree that they're not aware of themselves and there's no more dimyon, because that's an impossibility. Because as long as a person hasn't left the notion of being in a body like Moshe Rabbeinu, then a person is still a person, and a person as a person is going to be someone who feels something, and feeling is a lie. But rather, it's not that when I feel a moment of illumination, I have to say, okay, this is how I'm going to feel forever, because it's impossible to feel that way forever. But rather, what I should contemplate is that in the way that I feel right now, this is true. And to taste the level of true bittul, and to be moiser nefesh to Hashem at that point. But nevertheless, in the end of the day, just pretending to access bittul, pretending to be authentically one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's not true. It's just a tiny shine of the true thing. It's still an imagined notion. It's not the essential form of bittul, as is explained in the Raya Mehemna on the pasuk of Biyad HaNeviim Adama. Lefi dimyon dilhon, in accordance with each and every person's imagination. L'chol chad v'chad lefum shira dilay, each and every person in accordance with the conjecture of their own heart. Rak shahad dimyon gan kim emes. The pshat is not that it's a falsehood that's trying to be sold as truth. It's truth that is a falsehood. The dimyon is true. It's not a emes shikri. It's not a statement of truth that is shown to be a lie, but rather, as Rav Avram Abulafia points out, it's a sheker amiti. It's a real lie. It's an encounter with a dimyon. It's the shikras hasheker shu amisaso, as Rav Yitzchak Isaac Hamler says. It's the falsehood of the falsehood, which in and of itself is the kernel of its essential nature, which is the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can reveal himself by way of sheker, that he revealed himself by way of throwing emes down. Nevertheless, there is an established connection to the innermost point of absolute and radical fundamental truth, which is the Mechuyev HaMetzius, which is the emes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as the Rambam says, Hashem Elokechem emes, independent of all things, not contingent to any degree imaginable, essential in all of its possibilities. From that place, even the dimyon is emes. Aval b'chinas iskalus habitul lezeh b'chinas nafsho hu rak b'chinas ha'or v'dimyon b'chinas nafsho b'hamis. But that can only sometimes be revealed by way of our imagination, by way of our nefesh b'hamis, by way of our obsession with self. Because I have not yet subdued the nefesh b'hamis from its fierceness. At this stage, I'm still fundamentally oriented towards that place of dimyon. I'm inauthentic. I'm trying to find you, Hashem, in these places of inauthenticity. And even though in the moment of this imagined bittul, I can imagine a real experience of bittul, nevertheless, that's not that it was an actual real experience of bittul, it was a real imagined state of bittul. And that real imagined state of bittul has the ability of being koifef all of the nefesh bahamis. This is the work. This is what we need to be doing. This is what it's all about. What's the avodah of each and every person from Yisrael? Leha'amik da'atzo be'eza oifen lebatel nafsho afilu bebechinas dimyon. To deepen our experience in our minds, to try and find a way to negate a sense of self from the self, even if it's done by way of imagination, even if it's done by way of inauthenticity. Because even the dimyon is true from its shoresh. For in truth, there's absolutely nothing that is not reflective of the emes la'amiso, which is the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the only thing that's true. Everything else is shecha v'chazav. That's why nothing else exists in the end other than the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the secret kiss that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Nishmas Yisrael is that we're the lie that continues to exist. Yesh Reish Lamed Aleph is Osios Yisrael. It's the irreducible shape of Tzimtzum that HaKadosh Baruch Hu ensures will perpetually remain, not because it needs to, not because it has any individualized existence of its own, God forbid, not because it bears any more of a realness than any other non-real thing, but because HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose us. Kacha. Dimyon de Kedusha, dressing up and playing the role, not questioning the role. Dressing up and playing the role. Because even when it comes to elevating myself, when it comes to imagining myself as I would like to see myself from the perspective of redemption, the nefesh bahamis is going to get in line. Nimsa Dimyon is revealing something true as well. And this is not just an Eitza Yu'utza. This is the main purpose. He's hinting it again. This is not just in case of emergency break glass. This is the goal. The goal is Shekol kavnasi yisbarach haisa b'shvil zeh. That Hashem's intention was strictly for this. That each and every person should serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in accordance with the conjecture of their own heart, and according to their own imagination. This is the depth of love that is perpetual. It's all imagination. All of it is going to be in accordance with the way that the person imagines the yichud and the way that the person experiences this. One more makor that we're going to look at in the Avodas HaLevi is in Sharei Avoda, Shar HaRevi Parak Lamed Hey. We just looked at Parak Mem in Shar Gimel. Now we're looking at Parak Lamed Hey in Shar Dalet. And we're not even looking in Shar Yichud V'Amuna, where the Avodas HaLevi goes and explains the entire Seder Shtalshalus in accordance with this klal. So going through the process of a person connecting themselves to learning and davening in order to awaken within themselves the ahava and the yira, which enables them to come to a higher level of connectivity to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A person shouldn't spend too much time worrying whether these are imagined. Obviously, there are two states of love within the self: an everlasting love and a strong momentary love. But in truth, both are contained within the hidden love source within the self. Sometimes it's going to be revealed in a different way by way of my imagination. And the entire work that we have to do is just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, where it's Ner Mumayim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to enter into this trickery and this counterfeit nature of revelation, which appears to be a splitting of the absolute indivisible unity, but it's all for the sake of revealing down here our capacity to find Him in the same way. And Zot, the Heilige Avodas HaLevi, again, the third makor, bringing this out, bringing this very clear. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, when it's said about him that he was the most perfect of all perfect that can be, he was limited, he could not see, as the Leshem tells us, that it's fundamental, it's not symptomatic, it's fundamental. But rather he grasped it by way of a veil, clarified veil, not from the Olam HaYetzirah like all the other Nevi'im, but from the Olam of Bria. Even though he was grasping a high level of real Atzilistic abitul, which is unique to Moshe Rabbeinu. That was not revealed. The only way it was revealed was within the imagination, within the Nefesh of Bahamas, within the Bria itself. As Chazal have told us, Moshe Rabbeinu beheld HaKadosh Baruch Hu from a clarified lens. Even though it was refined, nevertheless it was still a lens, meaning to say it was still by way of imagination. Which is the vessel that enables the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be revealed, which is always by way of dimyon, because ma edam melach, ein doim melacha. Everything is just an attempt. Everything is just an attempt at giving shape and words and language and a sense to the indivisibility and the infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's endless essence, which is perpetually removed from grasp, both by the mind as well as the heart. Again, it's not a question of the perpetual existence and the never not absent infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. Kuli amalo pligi. There's nothing other than God. The question is the hasaga. And over here we see that the hasaga always comes about by way of an aspaklaria, by way of a partition, by way of a separation. And so too with the avos, it says in the Zohar, that they also saw through a lens. The lens in which they saw it was only a reflection of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu was masig a love, the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it was still b'derech midosav. It was still through the lens. It was never without the lens, never without the guf. It's the secret of Tchias HaMesim, that the goal is to come back to the dimyon of the guf. Biyad HaNevi'im Adama. The kol shekein shar nevi'im sharu biyoter slapshus biyoter hester. And all the more so, all of the later Nevi'im who saw through levels of engarbment and more concealment, it says over there 9 times Mara, all of the different gradations of vision that the lower Nevi'im would see. The essence reflected through 9 different lenses, down to the lowest place of Malchus, in Rashi. And this is what the pasuk says, Biyad HaNevi'im Adam, that the Nevi'im beheld something by way of imagination. It's not to belittle the Nevi'im and say, oh, look, they were also in the state of imagination. It's to elevate us to realize that we're also B'nai Nevi'im, because it's all through imagination and emunah. Hagam Shahaya B'Bechinas Dimyon, even though it was all imagined. Nevertheless, when seen from the lens of Emes La'amiso, the Dimyon is also true, because we're always going to be Balei Dimyon. We're always going to have a new level of inauthenticity that needs to be worked through, as the Morinayim says, La'olam yilmad adam lo lishma, ki mitoch shelo lishma balishma. La'olam means it will always be this way. You'll start lo lishma, you'll come to lishma, you'll think you made it to authenticity, and then a new level of authenticity will be revealed, revealing that what you thought was authentic is inauthentic. And it's la'olam, it will always be that way. Ki afilu b'chinas dimyon hu atzmusa baruch hu. Even imagination, we're touching upon the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'poyel hadimyon, by way of the dimyon, by way of the chaf of Anoichi. Hidden within Anoichi Hashem Elokecha is the chaf hadimyon. Rak shelafi kli hamakabel kacha nigalav. This is how it has to be revealed, by way of dimyon. And this is what we can apply to each and every Jew, each and every one of us. That each and every one of us grasps HaKadosh Baruch Hu by way of our own conjecture and our own grasp. It's only an aspect of an aspect, an imagination of an imagination, a point of a point, ad infinitum. Nevertheless, it's true. Nevertheless, I'm grabbing something real. There's an inherent authenticity buried in the heart of my inauthenticity. I have to stop waiting to feel authentic and just trust and believe that there's an authenticity. And then the inauthenticity becomes just a kli to reveal the authenticity. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who gave me imagination. This is the world of Rav Tzadok, the sugya of imagination in Rav Tzadok, the sugya of imagination in the writings of Slonim, in particular the Chesed Avram, the sugya of imagination in the writings of the Kadmoinim and Rabbi Nachman, in the regular writings of Kitvei Chabad, in the Bat Ayin, in Polish Chasidus, in Kotsk, in Ishbitz, in all of the different places, in Lumdus and Musar. This is the avodah of avodas hadimyon, of being mezachech ledimyon, and realizing that the dimyon itself is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the secret of Mashiach Tzidkenu, who comes to be poiter the chalomos, to reveal that our dimyon was emes. My imagination is what Hashem is revealing Himself as. This is the secret of what Rabbi Nachman says when he says, Hashem kivinu lo, in the future, what we're going to say is, Takatu demgat habir gehept, that the way I imagined him back then is what I'm seeing right now, that we have to trust our imagination. Biyad haneviyim adamah. Emuna is dimyon, as Rabbi Nachman says in Torah Chavhei, and in Torah Ches and Tinyana, that dimyon is the Reisha D'Lo Yada V'Olam HaYetzira. It's the ability to be medama and say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're so great, you're so expansive, you're so infinite, you're so giving, you're so filled with blessing and shefa, and all things come from you, and everything is sustained by you, and the vitality is from you, and every ounce of breath comes directly from the breath that you breathe into our lives, and every ounce of connectivity to you is rooted in the vitality that descends from the highest point of your ungraspable essence down to the lowest place of our congealment in experience. All of it is emes la'amiso, and all of it is dimyon entirely. None of it comes close to describing the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No word, nothing, in daimelacha, in aruch, there's nothing that's other than dimyon, even by Moshe Rabbeinu. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is emes la'amiso. But this is the avodah, to reveal that within our dimyon. And Rabbi Nachman teaches, and again, I don't want to go too deep into the sugya, and of course from Aharon HaLevi, but when Rabbi Nosson came to Rabbi Nachman to become a Talmud, one of the three stories that Rabbi Nachman told Rabbi Nosson was that the Alter Rebbe has a Talmud who has been studying the same Torah of his for 8 years. And he was referring to, as the Rebbe Shlita points out, he was referring to Rav Aharon HaLevi Staroselye, who was learning the secret of Shar Yichud ve'Amuna, but in particular, Perek Lamed Vav in Tanya, which is the secret of Dir B'Tachtonim, which is the secret of being Megala HaKadosh Baruch Hu from above to below. And from there, Rabbi Nosson was makabel a lot of strength. And so there's a deep connection between the Avodas HaLevi and Breslov. Also, nobody like Rabbi Nosson uses the language of Afal Pikain, that nevertheless, even though there's a struggle, it's specifically there that you'll find light. Rav Aharon HaLevi also uses this word because it's specifically within the radical sense of unity that the counterintuitive nature of unity revealing itself in the lowest places imaginable. So we'll end with a Sichos Haran, or maybe we'll end with a Kashan Tzemagid. So this is Os Nun Aleph. So Rabbi Nachman opens up and says this world is nothing, it's an Alma Shikra, it's only there to lead to the ultimate goal. It passes by us and everything is ki'ilu hu marviach b'chol pam v'sof eino klum. It's as if we're gaining something and in the end we don't get anything. And Zok the Heilige Rebbe, la avoid Hashem, and to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Eini yodea mihu sheyachal loimer she'aved es Hashem lefi gedula sabori yisbarach. I don't really know anybody who can claim that they can actually serve Hashem in terms of the true greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kimishi yodea ma'at me gedulasa yisbarach, eini yodea eich yachal loimer she'aved es yisbarach. Someone who knows a little bit about the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't think it can be said about anybody that they actually serve Hashem. V'shum malach v'saraf einu yachal lehispar al zoi sheyuchal aved es yisbarach. And no malach, no celestial force has the ability to claim with pride that it actually serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rak ha'ikr hu haratzon. The nukva de pardashka, the place of the nose, drawing down breath for chayin and chayid chayin, for the bilti gvul and the gvul in my life, for the emes and the sheker, authentic and inauthentic. That a person can ensure that their will and their desire is perpetually strong and intensified in running and chasing after HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even though everybody desires and wants to serve him, nevertheless, not every person is going to express their ratzon, their dimyon in the same way. There's many, many gradations of desire. Don't think that I'm talking about different people or even different moments in the same person's life. In each and every moment, there's gradations upon gradations of desire and connectivity. In the end, the general principle is, the main thing is, that I should have a desire and yearning to come close, to yearn towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And within my yearning, in the middle of my desire to reach that which can't be reached, I do avoid that. And Rabbi Nosson uses this lashon, and he adds ki'ilu, that in the end it's all ki'ilu. As the Rambam says, ki'ilu is a real thing. It's a dimyon de kedusha, it's a dimyon amiti, it's pretending with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's being authentically and authentically pretending with Hashem. In truth, everything in relationship to the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is absolutely nothing. Everything is as if, everything is ona'ah, everything is arama, everything is a sheker. Everything is a joke, everything is a laughing matter. Beloshan Ashkenaz, Klamerich, it's a play, it's a comedy, it's a game, it's a joke that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told, and we're anticipating the ending. We're holding our breath, waiting for the ending, and trusting in the tzaddikim who teach us that the ending is going to be a good one. Hayinu kecholmen. There's going to be a leda. There's going to be a schoik. There's going to be a yichud in this man of katnas. There's going to be a pagisha with the yam, and the yam is going to split. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to reveal the radical impossibility of his unity, which is the unity of above and below, of the singular point and the innumerable points that extend from within the singular point, all of them interconnected in the very same quintessential drop of Amunah, of tzaddik b'amunaso yichya, of Bel-Chabakuk v'himir al-Achas, Tzaddik be'emunasa yichya, the tachlis, the tiny dot that points to the fact that everything is contained together in the innermost tiny dot of the Osbeis of Bereshis. To end, there's a teaching from the Kosher Magid, which brings home this love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for our inauthenticity. The love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for the fact that sometimes we don't want to be serving you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes we don't know how to serve you. And he gives a mashal. He gives a mashal to a couple, a loving couple, where the husband wants to be with his wife. The husband wants to connect with his spouse, but the spouse is not interested in connecting. In the relationship, there's a disinterest, there's a lack of connection. But as a result of love and a result of the connection between the two of them, and a result of the spouse's desire to make their spouse happy, she prepares herself, she makes herself beautiful in the eyes of her husband so that the husband feels that, wow, my wife would really like to spend time with me right now. When in truth, if he only knew that she didn't, and he only knew that in truth it's a joke, and in truth it's pretend, he would be filled with such a love. He would be filled with such a love, an undying love for her, to know that even though you don't feel the way you're acting right now, you're willing to act the way that you think I want you to feel. And the love and the connection would grow in its intensity. But alas, the husband doesn't know, the wife doesn't know. And the misconnection leads to that sense of separation. But Zakt, the Heilige Kashnitzer Magid, there's times where the woman has no interest in joining in the love of connection. But there are times where, in accordance with her deep understanding and the deep understanding of the husband, again, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Knesset Yisrael, the deep understanding and intuition enables her to prepare herself and to bring joy to her husband as if she's excited. To the point that the husband is so confused that he thinks that it's the wife itself that wants the husband. She's made him feel so good. But her self-sacrifice is for nothing other than bringing joy to her husband. Because there's infinite reasons for a person to be broken and not want to draw into a place of connection. And if the husband only knew the pain and the struggle that the wife was overcoming in order to make him happy, in order to show a face of joy and connectivity and love and attachment and all of the things that each and every person is searching for in this world, the husband would come to love her even more. The self-sacrifice to make the husband feel loved and to make the husband feel okay. And if the husband knew what was bothering the wife, he would do anything in his power to help her get over it. This is an analogy for the Jewish people, which is the wife, with its husband, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When the Isha is in pain as a result of a gezerah, as a result of a decree, or there's something that's going on that is causing a disinterest on behalf of the wife, that Knesset Yisrael does not want to come into a place of unity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't want to serve him. But nevertheless, we strengthen ourselves like the wife who wants to make her husband happy. We strengthen ourselves and we bring joy to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Shabbos and Yantif and Daven and Tefillah and Mitzvos. But unlike the husband who doesn't know the intentions behind his wife's Mesiras Nefesh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that we're disinterested. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that this is not what we feel. Boer bo ahavasa kavyachol berishbei eish asher ad asher yasir meita kol yigone halev. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for us burns with an intensity, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love wants to remove all of the issues that are weighing on our heart. Kihu yodeya miriras hanefesh, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows how difficult it is and how bitter it is. V'hu bal yecholes lehiskaber ulachnia kol sonea, and he has the power to get rid of all of the concealment. And Isha Kshera, Knesset Yisrael, is the one who's willing to pretend for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We pretend with you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We pretend with you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for you to reveal to us the deep unity that is found even within our pretending. And then all of our moments of inauthenticity, all of our moments of struggle, all the moments of loss are going to be transformed into places of authenticity, of a dimyon de kedusha, beyond hanaviyim adama, pitron hachalomos, yitzias mitzrayim, a revelation that every single part of us is beautiful, every single part of us is beloved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yonasi tamasi afilushu b'darchainohu adayin tamim, it's still perfect. And that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves our counterfeit money, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not demand of us more than we can offer in the present moment that we find ourselves encountering Him. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves our counterfeit money, and He loves the tefillos that are thrown up when we don't feel like davening. Ki'ilu omid lifnei HaMelech. Because in our awareness of the dimyon, that's where we uncover emuna and bittul and the true willingness to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even the joke has gone for too long, and the joke has gone on. We're anticipating the v'tischak liyom Aharon, the day where it's going to be revealed that it's all been a stage, that it's all been a stage in the noira alila al bnei adam, in the unfolding process of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unity being revealed in ways that it's simply odio tertov, and things are sending upwards more and more. A person must imagine that things are good. Must imagine that things are good, as the Baal Sulam says. Why is it that amputation is becoming a real part of science? Understandably, amputation was a necessary reality if there was nothing other available to fix. But to see amputation as a part of the science of medicine, the Baal Sulam asks in the time where clearly there was a reorientation to the nature of amputation. And the Baal Sulam says, I have an analogy for it. He says, when it comes to seichel, when it comes to looking at the world with the lens of intellect, I always have to keep my mind open to two options, the good and the bad, the right and the wrong. When it comes to looking back on the past, I don't have to think about right or wrong anymore. It was what it was. And there's a certain kli that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created within the mind, which is the dimyon, imagination, which has the capacity to completely amputate any negativity, any broken way of thinking about the past events and looking at them only with eyes of tshuva. That's the koach of the dimyon, to cut off the other option and to imagine it in a certain way. And that's the secret of amputation to Kedusha, the ability of the Dimyon to cut off any possibility of negative thinking, any possibility of thinking that keeps me stuck, any possibility of thinking that keeps me away from Hashem. Adrabah, as the HaLevi says. The entire avodah of the Balatanya, the entire avodah of the Magid, the entire avodah of the Baal Shem Tov, the entire avodah of Rabbi Nachman, of the Arizal, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, of Moshe Rabbeinu. The entire Torah of Mashiach is to be Makariv HaLevavos, to be Makariv HaLevavos, to enable each and every person to feel that they are coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not to worry about whether it's absolutely true, not to worry about whether it's absolutely the right, authentic way to do it. Kol zman that a person has the Mazgeret of the Shulchan Aruch and the halachic framework of the Malchus, in which we find any semblance of functionality in this world, Kol zman that it's not outside of the realm of the Torah, and it's not hurting me and it's not hurting somebody else. My dimyon de kedusha, my way of coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is my way. And in that place, I'm connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I have to accept myself. I have to accept upon myself the fact that, yes, Hashem, I'm inauthentic. There's an inauthenticity, but nevertheless, within that inauthenticity, there's a deep authenticity that burns. It's a truth that's far higher than the external level of truth that demands perfection. It's a truth of the truth. It's the emes la'amiso that contains imperfection within itself as well. Be'ezras Hashem, from this taste of the avodas HaLevi, we should be zoicha to enter into Kriyas Yamsuf, to enter into the ability of making a yichud in this man of katnus when I don't even feel like leaving Mitzrayim, but suddenly ra'asa shifcha alayam, Mashalo ra'asi Yecheskel Bambuzi, in that place of the dimyon de kedusha, the zichuch hadimyon of entering into the watery depths of the sea. The watery depths of the sea, that place of the Dimyon de Kedusha, that dreamscape of the mind, which is the birthplace of Ruach HaKodesh and the harbinger to Nevuah itself. In that place, it's Tchias HaMesim. In that place, it's a yichud of Mayim b'Mayim. There's no more Mayim Elyonim, no more Mayim Tachtonim. In that place, the Dimyon is emes, and every desire that I have is true. Every element of yearning that I have in its unactualized state is actualized in that place. I just have to accept that sometimes it takes place by way of katnus, sometimes it takes place by way of unfeeling. And with this, we can enter in with Dimyon de Kedusha to be zocha to the ha'ara of Kriyas Yamsuf be'ezras Hashem.